The glass doors of the private executive wing slid open with a muted hiss. Conversations stopped. Nurses froze mid-step. A junior doctor instinctively straightened his coat. Two security guards turned at the same time, hands hovering near their radios, unsure why their instincts had suddenly gone rigid. A woman walked in carrying a baby. Then another woman followed, carrying a second baby. Newborns. Wrapped in identical white blankets. Faces barely visible, eyes closed, unaware of the room they had just silenced. They did not look lost. They did not hesitate. They walked with purpose, straight down the polished corridor that led to the most restricted room in the building. Inside that room sat Kang Min-jae, CEO, billionaire, the man Seoul's business media called untouchable. He was reviewing a medical report on a tablet when the door opened without a knock. Min-jae looked up, and then he stopped breathing. The first thing he noticed wasn't the women. It was the babies. Something about the way one tiny hand twitched against the blanket. Something about the shape of the nose. The curve of the lips. Familiar in a way that made no sense and sent a sudden chill down his spine. "This is a restricted area," he said, automatically rising from his chair. His voice was calm. Controlled. The voice of a man who had shut down billion-won negotiations without raising his tone. The woman in front did not bow, did not apologize, did not explain. She stepped forward and placed a sealed medical envelope on the table between them. "These babies are yours," she said. The words landed wrong, like a sentence spoken in the wrong language. Min-jae let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. That's not possible. He didn't need to ask why. He didn't need to ask how. He already knew. "I can't have children," he said flatly. Behind him, a doctor shifted uncomfortably. One of the security guards glanced at the other, unsure if this was a prank, a scam, or something that required immediate removal. The second woman tightened her hold on the baby in her arms. "We know," she said quietly. "That's why we're here." Min-jae's eyes dropped to the envelope. White. Official. Stamped with the insignia of the very medical institution he trusted with his life. He didn't open it. For a long moment, no one moved. The babies stirred softly, one letting out a sound that was barely more than a breath. Min-jae felt something cold spread through his chest. "This is some kind of mistake," he said, though his voice no longer carried certainty. "Or a lie." The first woman met his gaze without flinching. "Open it," she said. And for the first time in years, Kang Min-jae didn't trust his own hands to do what they were told. Kang Min-jae had built his life on certainty. Certainty was what allowed him to sit calmly while markets collapsed, while competitors failed, while men twice his age begged for meetings he never granted. Certainty was why this private executive wing existed at all, why doctors waited for him, why security cleared corridors with a single call, why no one entered his space without permission. And yet, standing in front of him now were two women who had walked past every layer of that certainty as if it didn't exist. Min-jae straightened, his spine rigid, his expression resetting into the mask the media called the Ice Prince. He gestured once, sharply. "Security," he said. "Escort them out." No anger. No panic. Just control. The guards hesitated. Not because they disobeyed him, but because the situation refused to fit into any category they recognized. The babies. The sealed medical envelope. The way the women stood their ground without pleading or posturing. "This is a restricted medical floor," Min-jae continued. "You've made your point. Now leave." The first woman didn't move. Instead, she adjusted the infant in her arms with practiced care, supporting the tiny head, shielding the face from the harsh hospital lighting. The baby slept through it all, oblivious to the power struggle unfolding inches away. "These children were born 3 days ago," she said. "They're healthy. Full term. No complications." Min-jae's jaw tightened. That information is irrelevant. It isn't, the second woman replied. Her voice was quieter, but it carried weight. It's everything. Behind Min-jae, Dr. Han cleared his throat. He had been Min-jae's personal physician for 7 years. He knew every detail of the man's medical history, every test, every devastating conversation. Sir, Dr. Han said carefully, perhaps we should review. There is nothing to review, Min-jae snapped. The word cut sharper than he intended. Silence followed. Heavy. Pressurized. Min-jae became aware of how many people were watching now. Nurses pretending to adjust equipment. Staff lingering too long in the corridor. Security standing in a loose semicircle, unsure whether to act. This was dangerous. Not because of the women, but because uncertainty bred rumors. And rumors were how empires cracked. You have 1 minute, Min-jae said. Explain yourselves. The first woman finally looked at him the way one might look at a locked door, not with anger but with resolve. My name is Seo Yuna, she said. I'm a neonatal nurse at this hospital. That gave Min-jae pause. Barely. But it registered. Their mother asked me to come, Yuna continued. She didn't trust that you'd listen otherwise. The second woman shifted slightly, stepping half a pace forward without realizing it. Her grip tightened around the baby, as though the room itself posed a threat. I didn't want to be here, she said. I tried not to come. Min-jae looked at her properly for the first time. She wasn't dressed for confrontation. No designer clothes. No calculated appearance. Just a simple coat, wrinkled at the sleeves, hair pulled back too quickly, eyes dark with exhaustion rather than ambition. Not what he had expected. Then why are you here? He asked. Her throat moved as she swallowed. Because they deserve the truth. Min-jae exhaled slowly through his nose. He gestured to the envelope again, untouched. And you think this, he stopped himself, corrected his tone. This document proves something science itself says is impossible. Dr. Han flinched. The word hung there. Impossible. Min-jae had learned to live with it, had carved his future around it, had locked it away behind achievement and discipline and a life that did not allow room for loss. You've made a serious accusation, he continued. If this is an attempt at extortion, understand that. We're not asking for money, Yuna said immediately. The mother nodded. I don't want anything from you. That surprised him more than the claim itself. Then what do you want? He demanded. The answer came without hesitation. For you to look at them. Min-jae's gaze dropped again, against his will. The babies lay quietly in their arms, faces relaxed, breaths shallow and rhythmic. One stirred, lips parting slightly, making a sound so small it barely qualified as noise. Something inside Min-jae tightened. It was irrational. Unacceptable. He straightened again, forcing distance back into his posture. This conversation is over, he said. Doctor, call administration. Security. Sir, Dr. Han interrupted, his voice low, urgent. The envelope. Min-jae turned sharply. What about it? Dr. Han didn't answer immediately. He was staring at the seal, at the lab insignia, at the verification code printed in the corner. Recognition crossed his face before he could hide it. Min-jae followed his gaze. Cold spread through his chest. That lab, Dr. Han said carefully, is the same one we used for your... Stop, Min-jae said. Too fast. Too sharp. The corridor seemed to lean closer. Min-jae picked up the envelope at last. It felt heavier than paper should. Official. Final. You are accusing this hospital, he said, and me of an error so catastrophic it defies everything we know. Yuna met his eyes. No, she said. We're presenting you with evidence. Min-jae didn't open it. Not yet. Security radios crackled softly. Somewhere down the hall, an elevator chimed. Time pressed in from all sides. Min-jae looked at the babies once more. Then at the women. Then at the envelope that could dismantle everything he thought he knew. Take them to conference room B, he said suddenly. Everyone froze. Dr. Han stared at him. Sir. If this is going to happen, Min-jae continued, his voice dangerously calm, it won't happen here. He turned and walked toward the door, already reclaiming movement, control, space. Behind him, the babies made another soft sound. And the envelope remained sealed. For now. The conference room was too clean, too bright, too quiet. Glass walls, soundproofed. A long polished table that reflected faces like a mirror no one wanted to look into. Kang Min-jae took the seat at the head automatically, muscle memory guiding him even now. Power had a posture. He slid into it without thinking. Across from him, the two women sat side by side. The babies lay in clear hospital bassinets that had been wheeled in moments earlier, positioned between them like fragile evidence. One baby stirred, fingers curling slowly, instinctively, grasping at nothing. Min-jae didn't sit back. He leaned forward, hands flat on the table, grounding himself. Start talking, he said. Slowly, carefully. The mother inhaled. Up close, Min-jae could see the details he'd missed before. The faint shadows under her eyes. The tension in her jaw that suggested she'd been clenching it for hours, maybe days. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out to rest her palm on the edge of the bassinet. She didn't look at him when she spoke. My name is Hannah, she said. I'm not here to accuse you of anything. I'm not here to shame you. I'm here because pretending you don't exist became harder than facing you. Her voice didn't crack. That, more than anything, unsettled him. Min-jae said nothing. Hannah continued. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you disappeared from my life. Dr. Han stiffened. Min-jae's eyes flicked to him, then back to her. You didn't leave a number, Hannah said. I didn't ask. I didn't think I needed to. It was one night. I told myself that was all it was meant to be. Min-jae felt irritation rise. You expect me to believe. I'm not asking you to believe me, she said calmly. I'm telling you what happened. The difference mattered. She shifted in her chair, adjusting her coat, as if suddenly aware of how small she looked in this room. When the test came back positive, I panicked. I looked for you. I tried. But your name is common. Your face wasn't. She glanced up at him then, just for a moment. By the time I realized who you were, it was too late to turn back without destroying everything. Min-jae folded his arms. Defensive. Controlled. So you waited until now. Yes. Convenient. Hannah's lips pressed together. She nodded once. I know what it looks like. Yuna leaned forward slightly. Sir, she didn't come to us first. She didn't want to. Min-jae ignored her. You waited 9 months, he said, then arrived with babies and paperwork. I waited because I was afraid, Hannah replied. Because I knew what kind of world you live in, and because I thought I could do this alone. She looked down at the babies. I was wrong. The words landed softly, but they carried weight. Min-jae felt the familiar instinct to dismantle the moment, to find flaws, leverage, exits. He leaned back now, forcing distance between himself and the bassinets. Fear isn't proof, he said. And neither is timing. Dr. Han spoke carefully. Sir, the lab verification has not been confirmed, Min-jae snapped. Dr. Han fell silent. Hannah's fingers brushed the edge of the bassinet again. One of the babies made a small sound, a half-whimper, then settled. Her movements were instinctive, precise, competent. She had done this before. Already. I didn't come here to argue biology with you, Hannah said. I came because these children exist. Whether you want them to or not. Min-jae's jaw tightened. Exist. That word again. He stood abruptly, walking to the glass wall and turning his back on them. Seoul stretched beyond the windows, sharp and distant. A city that obeyed rules. Logic. Systems. Behind him, Hannah kept speaking. I worked until the day I went into labor. I didn't take maternity leave because I couldn't afford it. I slept in chairs. I ate whatever was cheap and fast. I counted every one. Her voice remained steady, but something in it shifted, subtle, restrained. I told myself it was fine. That sacrifice was temporary. That love would be enough. Min-jae closed his eyes briefly. He had heard this tone before. In boardrooms, in courtrooms, in private meetings where people explained why they'd pushed themselves past breaking. It was the sound of someone who didn't expect rescue. You don't look like someone who needs help, he said without turning around. That's because I don't have time to look like it, Hannah replied. Silence filled the room again. Yuna broke it gently. Sir, the DNA analysis was processed internally to avoid external exposure. Min-jae turned sharply. Without my authorization? With hospital authorization, Yuna said. And ethical oversight. Dr. Han nodded slowly. The samples were collected post-birth. The chain of custody is intact. Min-jae felt the walls tightening. Why now? He demanded. Why not disappear? Why not raise them somewhere else and never come back? Hannah finally stood. She was shorter than he expected. Slighter. But there was nothing weak in the way she held herself. Because one day, she said, they would ask. Her voice softened, just a fraction. And I refuse to lie to my children about who they are. That did it. Something in Min-jae's chest shifted, not dramatically, not yet, but enough to disrupt the neat compartments he'd built. He turned back to the table. To the babies. For the first time, he let himself look properly. The second baby had his eyes. There was no denying it now that he allowed the thought. The same crease at the brow. The same faint downturn at the corners of the mouth when sleeping. A coincidence, his mind insisted. It had to be. You don't understand what you're doing, he said quietly. My life isn't built to absorb surprises like this. Hannah met his gaze. Neither was mine. Dr. Han's phone buzzed softly. He checked it. Froze. Sir, he said. The lab just finalized the cross-verification. Min-jae's pulse spiked. Yuna straightened. Hannah's hand tightened on the bassinet rail. Dr. Han hesitated, then placed the tablet on the table, turning it so Min-jae could see. Probability of paternity, Dr. Han read slowly, professionally, as if careful language could soften the blow. 99.9%. The room seemed to tilt. Min-jae stared at the number. 99.9%. Near certainty. Science's version of finality. Hannah didn't smile. Didn't cry. She simply exhaled, as though a weight she'd been carrying alone had finally shifted, even if it hadn't lifted. Min-jae felt the blood drain from his face. That's not possible, he whispered. Dr. Han didn't contradict him. Outside the glass walls, the city continued as if nothing had changed. Inside, Kang Min-jae's carefully controlled world cracked, quietly, decisively, around a number he could no longer argue with. The number stayed on the screen longer than it should have. 99.9%. Kang Min-jae had negotiated hostile takeovers with less resistance in his chest than what that decimal point did to him now. He stared at it, waiting for his mind to reject it the way it rejected bad data, flawed projections, human error. Nothing happened. The room didn't correct itself. The number didn't disappear. Instead, something else surfaced, older, deeper, and far less manageable. "No," Min-jae said quietly. It wasn't denial yet. It was reflex, the kind that followed impact. Dr. Han didn't speak. He knew better than to rush this moment. Min-jae stood so abruptly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. The sound echoed, sharp, breaking the silence that had pressed in on them all since the confirmation appeared. "This test is wrong," Min-jae said. "Run it again." "Sir." "Run it again," he repeated, louder now. "Independently. Externally. Use every lab you trust." Dr. Han nodded once. "We already did." 3. Min-jae's breath caught. 3, he demanded. "Yes," Dr. Han said gently. "Different technicians. Different machines. Same result." Hannah closed her eyes. Not in relief. In exhaustion. Min-jae turned on her then, something raw breaking through his control. "You knew." "I hoped," she corrected. "I didn't know." "You knew enough to come here." "I knew enough to stop lying to myself." His hands curled into fists at his sides. He paced once, twice, then stopped short of the glass wall, bracing one palm against it as if the city itself might steady him. "This is medically impossible," he said. "You don't understand what you're claiming." "I understand exactly what I'm claiming," Hannah replied quietly. "No," he snapped, spinning back toward her. "You don't. Because if you did, you'd understand that I've already buried this conversation once." That got Dr. Han's attention. Min-jae's jaw tightened. He hadn't meant to say that. The past had slipped out through the crack this moment had forced open. "Sir," Dr. Han said carefully, "perhaps now is the time." "I was 28, Min-jae interrupted. The room stilled. He hadn't planned to say it aloud. He rarely did. But the weight of the number, the baby's presence, the echo of impossible, it all collapsed the distance he'd kept for years. "I was 28 when I was told I'd never have children," he continued. His voice was even, but something beneath it trembled. "Not maybe. Not unlikely. Never." Hannah didn't move. She listened. "It wasn't an accident," Min-jae said. "It wasn't genetics. It was damage." He swallowed. "An infection that went untreated because I was too busy proving myself to notice my body was failing." Dr. Han lowered his gaze. "I was functionally infertile," Min-jae said. "That's the phrase they used. Functionally. As if the word made it easier." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "They gave me percentages too. 0 point something. Statistical anomalies. Miracles that belong to other people." The babies stirred softly, as if responding to his voice. Min-jae looked at them, then away. "I built my life accordingly," he said. "I removed the possibility. I cut it out like a tumor." His voice hardened. "So do not tell me this is real without explaining how." Dr. Han stepped forward. "Sir, infertility does not always mean absolute sterility." Min-jae turned slowly. "That's not what you told me." "I told you what the data supported at the time," Dr. Han replied. "Based on repeated tests. Based on probability." "Which was 0. "Which was near 0, Dr. Han corrected gently. "There is a difference." Min-jae laughed again, sharper now. "You're splitting words." "No," Dr. Han said. "I'm explaining margins." He took a breath. In rare cases, extremely rare, viable sperm production can occur intermittently. Temporary windows. Brief enough to be missed in testing. Hannah's breath caught. Min-jae stared at him. "You're saying—" "I'm saying impossible is a word medicine uses cautiously," Dr. Han continued. "It usually means statistically unlikely. Not never." Silence followed. The kind that reshaped everything around it. Min-jae sank back into his chair, slower this time, as though gravity had increased without warning. "So while I was convincing myself I'd moved on," he said quietly, "my body didn't get the message." Dr. Han didn't answer. He didn't need to. Min-jae closed his eyes. He remembered the night he'd been told. The white room. The doctor who wouldn't meet his gaze. The polite condolences offered too early, as if morning was expected immediately. He remembered leaving the hospital and not going home, walking until the city lights blurred, telling himself it didn't matter. That legacy was built, not born. That love was optional. That loneliness was manageable. All lies he'd learned to live with. Until now. Across the table, Hannah stood frozen in place. She had known this conversation might come, but she hadn't expected the fracture she was witnessing, the way certainty was draining out of him in real time. "I didn't plan this," she said softly. "I didn't trap you. I didn't manipulate biology." Min-jae looked at her. For the first time, his gaze wasn't cold. It was searching. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Not accusing. Almost lost. Hannah swallowed. "Because when I found out who you were, I looked you up." He stiffened. "I saw your interviews," she continued. "Your reputation. Your control." She hesitated. "And I saw what you'd built your life around." Min-jae said nothing. "You talked about legacy like it was something you designed," Hannah said. "Not something that happened to you." She met his eyes. "I didn't want to be a complication." Something in Min-jae cracked then. Not loudly. Not completely. But enough. He looked down at the babies again. One of them had woken. Tiny eyes blinked open, unfocused, searching. The baby's gaze landed nowhere specific, and yet Min-jae felt seen. Unprotected. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted quietly. Hannah's shoulders dropped, just a fraction. "I didn't either," she said. That didn't stop it from happening. The weight of that settled between them. Dr. Han cleared his throat softly. "Sir, there's more." Min-jae looked up. "Of course there is." "The condition that caused your infertility," Dr. Han said carefully, "also increases the likelihood of complications." Hannah stiffened. "What kind of complications?" Dr. Han hesitated. "Genetic instability. Higher miscarriage risk. Multiple births are rare, but not unheard of." Twins. Min-jae closed his eyes again. "So this," he said slowly, "was the exception of the exception." "Yes," Dr. Han said. Min-jae exhaled. A strange sound escaped him, half disbelief, half something dangerously close to awe. "I spent 15 years believing a door had been welded shut," he said. "And now you're telling me it was unlocked the entire time." "Unlocked briefly," Dr. Han corrected. "And without warning." Min-jae opened his eyes. "Which means," he said, "this wasn't fate." Hannah tilted her head slightly. "What was it, then?" Min-jae looked at the babies again. Then at her. Then at the future he had never allowed himself to imagine. "I don't know," he said. And for the first time since the doors had opened, that uncertainty didn't terrify him. It terrified him later, when he realized what it would demand. Dr. Han gathered his tablet, his tone shifting back to professional caution. "Sir, there are implications. Personal. Public. Familial. Min-jae nodded slowly. Yes, he said. There are. Outside the glass walls, a shadow passed. Footsteps approached. A familiar presence, measured, authoritative, unwelcome. Before anyone could turn, the door handle moved. And Kang Min-jae knew, with sudden certainty, that the next impossible thing was already walking toward them. The door opened without a knock. That alone told Kang Min-jae everything he needed to know. He didn't turn immediately. He didn't have to. The presence that entered the room carried a gravity he had known since childhood, controlled, deliberate, unquestioned. Madame Kang had arrived. Her heels struck the floor once, twice, each step measured. The room adjusted around her the way rooms always did. Doctors straightened. Security stiffened. Even Dr. Han instinctively stepped back, lowering his gaze. Madame Kang stopped just inside the doorway. Her eyes moved first, not to her son, not to the women, but to the bassinets. She didn't rush. She assessed. 2 babies. Identical blankets. Identical hospital bands. Alive. Real. Min-jae felt something tighten in his chest. Clear the room, she said calmly. No one moved. She turned her head slightly. That wasn't a request. Security glanced at Min-jae. For the first time in years, he hesitated. Stay, Min-jae said. Madame Kang's gaze snapped to him. That, more than anything else, marked the shift. Slowly, deliberately, she turned fully toward her son. You will regret saying that. Possibly, Min-jae replied. His voice was steady, but the cost of that steadiness burned through him. But not today. Silence followed. Then Madame Kang smiled. It was a small expression, polite, almost warm, the kind she wore at charity galas and shareholder dinners. Very well, she said. I'll hear this absurdity myself. She approached the table and took the empty chair opposite Min-jae, sitting with perfect posture. Only then did she glance at Hannah. And you are? She asked. Hannah stood. I'm their mother, she said. Madame Kang's eyes flicked back to the babies, then to Hannah's face. She studied her the way one studied a document, searching for flaws, leverage, inconsistencies. I see, Madame Kang said. And you've decided to announce this now? Yes, Hannah replied. And you expect what, exactly? Madame Kang asked. Applause? Compensation? No, Hannah said. Acknowledgement. Madame Kang's smile faded. Be careful with your words, she said coolly. Acknowledgement has consequences. Min-jae leaned forward. Mother. She didn't look at him. I built this family from nothing, Madame Kang continued. I protected it when men twice as powerful tried to take it apart. I will not watch it be destabilized by coincidence and sentiment. Then you should listen, Min-jae said. Because this isn't sentiment. Madame Kang turned sharply to him. You've been wrong before. The room tightened. Min-jae inhaled. These children are mine. The words landed heavily. Madame Kang laughed. A single, controlled sound. That's impossible. Dr. Han spoke before Min-jae could. Madam, the DNA results. I don't care about numbers, she snapped. I care about reality. She stood and walked toward the bassinets. Hannah moved instinctively, stepping between her and the babies. Madame Kang stopped. The air went cold. You are standing in my way, Madame Kang said softly. Hannah met her gaze. Yes. Min-jae rose. Mother. Enough. Madame Kang looked at him slowly. Do you know how many people would destroy you for less than this? Yes, Min-jae said. And I've destroyed them first. Madame Kang studied him now, not as a son, but as an adversary.
Tell me, she said, how this happened.
The room stilled. Min-jae's jaw tightened. He glanced at Hannah. She nodded once. It was one night, Hannah said. Years ago. No names. No promises. Madame Kang's eyes narrowed. Convenient. We didn't exchange contact information, Hannah continued. Not because I planned this, but because it wasn't meant to be anything more. Min-jae closed his eyes briefly. He remembered. The hotel room. The rain outside. The exhaustion that had followed weeks of negotiations. The woman who hadn't asked who he was, who hadn't cared. The night he had allowed himself to forget who he was supposed to be. When I found out I was pregnant, Hannah said, I tried to find him. I couldn't. Madame Kang turned to Min-jae. You didn't think to leave a name? No, he said. I didn't think at all. Madame Kang's lips pressed into a thin line. So, she said, a lapse in judgment has now produced a threat to everything we've built. They're not a threat, Min-jae said sharply. They are a liability, Madame Kang replied. And liabilities are managed. Hannah stiffened. They're children. Madame Kang ignored her. Do you understand what happens if this becomes public? Shareholders panic. Rivals exploit uncertainty. Your image fractures. Min-jae's voice hardened. My image isn't my life. Madame Kang looked at him with something like disbelief. That's exactly what it is. She turned back to Hannah. You should have stayed silent. Hannah's hands trembled, but her voice didn't. I won't apologize for telling the truth. Madame Kang smiled thinly. Truth is negotiable. Min-jae slammed his hand on the table. Enough. The sound echoed. Everyone froze. These are my children, Min-jae said. Not assets. Not leverage. Not variables. Madame Kang studied him. You sound emotional. I am, he said. That doesn't make me wrong. Madame Kang exhaled slowly. Emotion clouds judgment. Then maybe judgment needs to be clouded, Min-jae shot back. Because what you're suggesting is unacceptable. Madame Kang turned away from him and addressed Dr. Han. Doctor, remove these women and their claims from this floor. Dr. Han hesitated. Madam, I said remove them. Min-jae stepped forward. No. Madame Kang faced him fully now. This was no longer a family disagreement. This was war. You are choosing chaos, she said quietly. I'm choosing responsibility, Min-jae replied. Madame Kang's eyes flicked to the babies again. So, she said, you intend to acknowledge them publicly. Min-jae didn't hesitate. Eventually. That will destroy you. Then I'll rebuild, he said. Madame Kang laughed softly. You think legacy is something you can reconstruct after it collapses. She stepped closer to him, lowering her voice. I built this empire so you wouldn't have to make choices like this. And I built myself so I could, Min-jae replied. Madame Kang straightened. Very well, she said. Then let us be clear. The room leaned in. You may keep your children, she continued, or you may keep your empire. Min-jae's breath caught. Madame Kang's gaze was steady, unyielding. If you acknowledge them, she said, I will remove you from control. The board will follow. I will ensure the narrative destroys your credibility before sympathy can form. Hannah's face drained of color. If you deny them, Madame Kang continued, this ends here. Quietly. Generously. She turned to Hannah. You will receive compensation. Protection. Silence. Hannah shook her head. No. Madame Kang ignored her. You choose, she said to Min-jae. Family or power? Silence crashed down. The babies stirred. Min-jae looked at them, then at Hannah, then at the woman who had shaped his entire existence. He felt the weight of every life diverging from this moment. This isn't over, Madame Kang said softly. It's just begun. And Kang Min-jae realized that whatever he chose next would burn one world down, no matter which one he tried to save. The room felt smaller after the ultimatum. Not physically, nothing had moved, but something invisible had shifted, compressing the air, pressing against lungs and thoughts alike. Kang Min-jae stood at the center of it, motionless, as if moving too quickly might cause the entire structure of his life to collapse at once. Family or power? Madame Kang remained standing, composed, hands folded neatly in front of her. She looked as though she had just concluded a board meeting, not issued a sentence that would split her son in two. Hannah was the first to move. She stepped forward, placing herself fully between the bassinets and Madame Kang, her body angled protectively, instinctively. The action was small, but unmistakable. If you think, Hannah said, her voice shaking just slightly now, that I will accept your money and disappear, you're wrong. Madame Kang regarded her coolly. You would be foolish not to. I've been foolish before, Hannah replied. I survived it. Min-jae felt something sharp twist in his chest. Madame Kang's gaze flicked briefly to the babies, then back to Hannah. You don't understand the scale of what you're challenging. I understand exactly enough, Hannah said. Enough to say no. Madame Kang turned to her son. You see, emotion, stubbornness. This is what you are choosing. Min-jae didn't answer immediately. He was watching Hannah now, watching the way her shoulders squared despite the tremor in her hands, watching the way she didn't look at him for permission, or reassurance, or rescue. She wasn't here to be saved. She was here to protect. Mother, Min-jae said slowly, you're threatening the wrong person. Madame Kang raised an eyebrow. Am I? You think this is about control, he continued. About leverage. About optics. He took a step toward the bassinets, not touching them, yet, but close enough to feel their presence. This is about responsibility. Madame Kang's lips curved faintly. Responsibility to whom? Min-jae looked down. One of the babies had begun to fuss, a soft, restless sound that cut through the tension like a blade. Hannah reached into the bassinet automatically, resting a finger against the baby's tiny hand. The infant's fingers curled around it with surprising strength. Min-jae froze. The grip was instinctive, unthinking, unconditional. Something inside him broke open. To them, he said quietly. Madame Kang's eyes hardened. You are sentimentalizing biology. No, Min-jae said. I'm acknowledging consequence. He turned back to her. You taught me that every action has a cost. That avoiding cost doesn't make it disappear, it just delays payment. Madame Kang studied him for a long moment. And you think this is payment? Yes. Hannah finally looked at him then. Really looked at him. Not as a CEO. Not as a threat. But as a man standing on the edge of something he could not unsee. You don't have to do this, she said softly. Min-jae shook his head. I do. Dr. Han shifted uncomfortably. Sir, Madam, perhaps this discussion. Stay out of this, Madame Kang snapped. Dr. Han fell silent. Madame Kang stepped closer to Min-jae, lowering her voice. If you choose this path, you will lose everything I built for you. Min-jae met her gaze. You didn't build it for me. Her eyes flashed. I built it because of you. And I am telling you, he replied, that I will not trade my children for it. The word children hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. Hannah inhaled sharply. Madame Kang's composure cracked, just slightly. "So you've decided," she said. "Yes," Min-jae replied. "I choose them." Silence followed. Then Madame Kang laughed. It wasn't soft this time. It wasn't polite. It was cold. "You are making an emotional decision," she said. "And emotional decisions are punished." "Then punish me," Min-jae said. "Not them." Madame Kang's gaze flicked to Hannah. "You will regret this." Hannah didn't flinch. "I already know what regret feels like." Madame Kang turned back to her son. "If you proceed, I will initiate removal proceedings immediately. By morning, the board will convene." Min-jae nodded. "I expected as much. You will be humiliated. I've survived worse. You will lose your authority. I'm willing to learn what remains without it." Madame Kang stared at him, searching, perhaps for the boy she once controlled, the man she thought she understood. She didn't find him. "Very well," she said. "Then this conversation is over." She turned sharply toward the door. Before she reached it, Min-jae spoke again. "They're staying." Madame Kang stopped. "They will not leave this hospital under your terms," Min-jae continued. "Not today. Not ever." Madame Kang turned slowly. "You overestimate your position." "Perhaps," Min-jae said. "But I am still their father." The word echoed. "Father." Madame Kang's jaw tightened. "We'll see." She left without another word. The door closed behind her with finality. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Hannah exhaled, a long, shuddering breath she had been holding for far too long. "You didn't have to do that," she said again. Min-jae turned to her. "I know. Your life was already incomplete," he said quietly. She searched his face, looking for certainty, for doubt, for something that would tell her this wasn't another mistake. "What happens now?" she asked. Min-jae didn't answer immediately. He looked at the babies. Really looked. Up close now, without glass or distance or denial. One of them had opened their eyes again, dark, unfocused, impossibly curious. Min-jae reached out. His hand hovered for a moment, suspended between fear and instinct. Then he touched the baby's tiny fingers. They wrapped around his finger instantly. His breath caught. A sharp, involuntary sound escaped him. Half laugh, half sob. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know what doesn't." Hannah watched him carefully. "You don't owe us anything," she said. "I didn't come here to force you into fatherhood." Min-jae looked up. "You didn't force me. You revealed me." She blinked. "I've been hiding behind impossibility for 15 years, he continued, telling myself that loss was permanent because it was convenient. He swallowed. "I was wrong." Hannah's eyes filled, not with relief, but with something deeper. Recognition. "Responsibility," she said softly, "isn't ownership." "I know," Min-jae replied. "It's presence." The baby stirred again, making a small sound that felt louder than any argument. Min-jae straightened slowly. "But," Hannah said carefully, "you need to understand something." He looked at her. "I will not allow my children to become weapons in your family's war." His chest tightened. "I won't either." "That means," she continued, voice steady now, "no announcements, no statements, no public acknowledgement, yet." Min-jae hesitated. "My mother won't stop." "I know," Hannah said, "which is why I need to leave." The word hit him harder than the ultimatum had. "Leave?" he repeated. "Yes. With them." His voice dropped. Hannah nodded. "For now," she said. Until I know they're safe. Until I know I can trust the world you come from. Min-jae felt fear surge, sharp, immediate, unfamiliar. You don't trust me? I trust you, she said. I don't trust what surrounds you. He had no argument. She continued. This isn't punishment. It's protection. Min-jae looked down at the babies again. The thought of them leaving, of the room emptying, of the silence returning, felt unbearable.
When will I see them again? He asked quietly.
Hannah hesitated. I don't know, she said honestly. That hurt more than anger would have. Min-jae nodded slowly. Then let me help. She shook her head. Not yet. The babies stirred again, both this time, their movements small but insistent. Hannah reached for them, lifting each carefully, cradling them against her chest. Min-jae stepped back automatically, giving her space. She paused at the door. You chose them today, she said. That matters. He met her gaze. I'll keep choosing. She nodded once. Then she left. The door closed behind her. The room was silent. Min-jae stood alone, his fingers still faintly warm where tiny hands had gripped it.
Outside, the city moved on, unaware that an empire had just begun to fracture not from greed or betrayal, but from love finding a way in. And somewhere down the corridor, two babies were carried away from the only man who had ever denied their existence, leaving him behind with a choice he would now have to live up to. The hospital room felt hollow after they left. Not empty, hollow. Kang Min-jae remained where he was long after the door closed, long after the faint echo of footsteps faded down the corridor. The bassinets were gone. The soft, rhythmic sounds that had filled the room minutes earlier were gone with them. What remained was silence heavy enough to press against his ears. For the first time in his adult life, Min-jae did not immediately move to fix something. He stood there, hands at his sides, breathing slowly, as if motion itself might undo what little balance he had managed to reclaim. He had chosen. That fact alone should have steadied him. Instead, it left him exposed. Dr. Han spoke carefully from behind him. Sir, I'll arrange for discreet follow-ups, medical protections, legal consultations. Min-jae nodded once, without turning. Thank you. Dr. Han hesitated. You did the right thing. Min-jae didn't answer. Right and wrong had never frightened him. Consequences had. When the doctor finally left, the door closing softly behind him, Min-jae was alone. Truly alone. He walked to the glass wall and rested his forehead against it, eyes open, staring out at the city. Seoul glowed below, alive, indifferent, relentless. Somewhere out there, Hannah was holding the twins closer than necessary, her body curved protectively around them, her mind already calculating exits and risks and contingency plans. He didn't blame her. If their positions were reversed, he would have done the same. His phone vibrated. Once. Twice. Then again. He didn't need to check it to know who it was from. The board. Advisors. His mother's people, already moving pieces into place. The empire did not pause for personal revelations. Min-jae straightened and finally picked up the phone. He didn't answer it. Not yet. Instead, he opened his calendar. Meetings. Calls. A schedule planned weeks in advance, built on the assumption that his life would remain linear, predictable, controllable. He began deleting entries. One by one. The act was quiet, deliberate, irreversible. When the phone rang again, he answered. Yes, he said calmly. I'm aware. A pause. No, he continued. I won't be making a statement. Another pause, longer this time. I understand the risk. His gaze hardened. I accept it. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Outside the hospital, night had fully settled in.
Min-jae left the executive wing without ceremony, refusing the private exit his security insisted upon. He walked through the public corridors instead, past patients and families and strangers who had no idea who he was or what had just changed. For once, anonymity felt like mercy. In the parking structure, he stopped beside his car but didn't get in. He leaned against it, exhaling slowly, letting the cold air bite through his coat. His mother would move quickly. She always did. The board would fracture. Rumors would surface, first subtle, then surgical. Questions about his judgment, his stability, his future. And then there was Hannah. Where would she go? How far would she run to keep the children safe? Min-jae closed his eyes. I will not be absent, he told himself. The words felt fragile, aspirational, but they were his. Across the city, in a modest apartment borrowed from a friend, Hannah moved quietly through the living room, the twins finally asleep in a portable crib near the window. Streetlight filtered in through thin curtains, casting soft shadows across their faces. She watched them breathe. Inhale. Exhale. Alive. Safe. For now. Her phone buzzed on the table. A single message. Unknown number. I won't push. But I won't disappear. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she typed back. Neither will I. She set the phone aside and sat on the floor beside the crib, exhaustion finally overtaking adrenaline. The world felt heavier now, not because of fear, but because of possibility. Possibility demanded vigilance. Back at his penthouse, Min-jae stood in the dark, city lights framing him like a cage of glass and steel. He loosened his tie, then removed it entirely, letting it fall where it landed. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the room belonged to him. He walked into his study and opened a locked drawer he hadn't touched in over a decade. Inside lay old medical reports, yellowed slightly at the edges. Words he had memorized once upon a time. Functionally infertile. He stared at them, then closed the drawer again. Not impossible, he said aloud. The words echoed. Min-jae moved to the window and looked out at the city once more. Somewhere out there were two children who shared his blood, his history, his mistakes. And a woman who had drawn a line he would have to earn the right to cross. He straightened. The fight ahead would not be loud at first. It would be strategic, subtle, relentless. He knew how to fight those battles. This time, however, the stakes were not abstract. They had names. They had faces. And for the first time, Kang Min-jae's ambition was no longer about legacy, it was about presence. The camera would pull back now. From the penthouse. From the quiet apartment. From the city that held both apart. Leaving behind a single truth suspended in uncertainty. The impossible had already happened. And what came next would demand everything.